joined us. Welcome, everyone. The conference will be starting in a few minutes, but before we start, we wanted to ask a few questions to get to know our participants. You just have to answer yes or no on the questions that will pop out on your screen. So we have three questions. The first one, are you confident to discuss the food systems framework and its related concept? Just click yes or no. And we wanted to know, the second one, we wanted to know if you have attended the first and second conference. It was held in June, and the other one was on the 3rd of July. And also we wanted to know if your organization is present in Myanmar and if you are implementing work in food systems, food security, agriculture, or nutrition. Okay, so we can see here that 40% of our participants are confident to discuss the food systems framework and its related concept. And around 80% or 20% of the current participants attended the first or second online conference. So that's 80%. We have new participants, and 33% of our participants are working in Myanmar, or at least their organization is present in Myanmar. So thank you for participating in our poll this morning. So yeah, it's 10 a.m. Yangon time. Good morning to all, to everyone, to our participants. Thank you for joining us in this third and last of a series entitled Transforming Food Systems in Myanmar, Vietnam, Philippines, and Cambodia. My name is Irish Bagilat, and I am with the International Institute of Rural Reconstruction. So for today's conference, we will be joined by speakers from the International Institute of Rural Reconstruction, or IIRR, the Alliance of Bioversity International, and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, or CIAT, and the United Nations International Labor Organization, or ILO. Before we proceed to the formal opening of this conference, let me first orient everyone about the platform that we will be using to interact with you. So please check below the screen of the Zoom platform. The first button is your audio settings. This is where you can adjust your volume if you're not able to hear me very well, or if you wanted to connect a pair of headphones or speakers. Next to the audio setting button is the chat box. You can use this button to introduce yourself, your organization, your food systems related work, or experience on the topics that will be presented later. You can also use this space to discuss with fellow participants or anything that you wanted to say. And then there's the raise hand icon. We won't be using this function. So if you have any questions, just post them directly on the Q&A box. So next to the raise hand is the Q&A box. This is the main button you will use to interact with us. Post here any questions you may have. Feel free to do so during the webinar's presentation and discussion. Our resource speakers will respond to them, and some of them will be answered during the Q&A sessions. So as mentioned earlier, this conference is a three-part series brought to you by IRR, the Alliance of Bioversity International, and CIAT, and the International Development Research Center of Canada. The first online conference, entitled Myanmar's Food System, Livelihoods and COVID-19, was held on June 9. That was last month. The event was participated in by 74 individuals. The second conference, Food Systems Related Initiatives in Myanmar, happened on the 3rd of July, and it was a conference where 4 participants presented their ongoing work and approaches, challenges, opportunities within food systems in Myanmar. So these 3-part series have the following objectives. First is to share concepts and experiences on sustainable food systems. Second, to identify existing programs which may contribute towards a more healthy, sustainable, and socially inclusive food systems in Myanmar. Third, to identify needs, concerns, and opportunities in building a sustainable food systems in Myanmar. To commence potential partnerships and collaboration among stakeholders. And lastly, to prioritize areas of possible investment to start work of sustainable food systems. And we expect to have a synthesis document at the end of the series that we will be sharing to all our stakeholders. So now to formally start, I would like to call on Edgar Rodriguez, a Senior Program Specialist for IDRC Canada, for a short welcome message. Edgar?
I would like to wish you a very good morning to everyone. My name is Edgar Rodriguez. I'm the lead for the Knowledge for Democracy Myanmar initiative at the International Development Research Center, Canada. On behalf of IDRC, I would like to welcome you to this webinar, and I would like to start by thanking the organizers, the International Institute for Rural Reconstruction, IRR, and the Alliance of Bioversity International and the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. Indeed, the global challenges of poverty, malnutrition, climate change, and degradation and biodiversity loss call for new research, solutions, and innovations from all of us. IDRC knows well that to overcome these challenges, we also need to engage in stronger partnerships so that we can all deliver higher impact. So joining forces with other like-minded institutions like today, it's one step forward. This morning, we are welcoming almost 100 participants from different parts of from Myanmar and from across Asia and around the globe. So this number already illustrates the current global interest in examining more closely how food systems work and how they could become how can they support better and healthier diets for millions of people in Asia. Today's speakers will talk about ongoing programs and interventions that aim at making food systems stronger in Southeast Asia. Yes, we would all like to learn from these interventions, and we want to have more organizations inspired to undertake further research on sustainable food systems. But we're equally eager to see donors and policymakers in Myanmar willing to examine and explore these lessons into their regular advice and policymaking. And they are. There is a lot of, but to do this, there's a lot of work still ahead of us. Recently, IDRC, with international and Burmese partners, has concluded a report on doing research in Myanmar with the Global Development Network and Myanmar Center for Economic and Social Development in Yangon. I'm sharing the link to the report and the podcast in the chat box. Our report, launched this May, carries important recommendations about how research in Myanmar works. First, it finds that research is dominated by international donors who tend to set the research agenda through their funding. The report calls for much greater donor coordination and for greater role for Myanmar's government, universities, think tanks, research centers to contribute to the research agenda. Also, the report finds that while Myanmar has increased funds for research over the last decade, these funds remain too small and too focused on hardcore scientific research in natural sciences, agriculture research, and engineering. But less than 0.4% of those total research funds goes into social science research that could investigate the impact of interventions, such as those as we are going to be talking today, those ones in agriculture or food systems. And so we need more. The report also calls for greater support for Myanmar researchers to publish research and to engage more in public policy. There's a lot, the report points out how little evidence, few reports and studies are being used by elected and non-elected officials when looking to design or recommend new policies in agriculture or other fields. So most of the respondents working in policy found that the studies available to them were not really specific enough, and they were difficult to use, or they were not supported by high quality or trustworthy data. So the good news is that the Myanmar policymakers are open to embrace lessons from other countries, and we are ready to embark in, and they are ready to embark in reforms at many levels as part of the democratic transformation of Myanmar. So for an institution like IDRC that funds research for policy in Asia, and this is a very encouraging piece of news. In fact, since 2017, IDRC and the Government of Canada has set up the Knowledge for Democracy Myanmar initiative, which is entirely dedicated to promoting capacity building for policy research in the country, engaging universities, think tanks, parliaments, government, and civil society. The initiative encourages greater public policy insights from universities and think tanks in Myanmar, who are the key knowledge producers, or should be the key knowledge producers. And government engagement, and the initiative also supports greater government engagement with parliaments, especially those in the states and regions of Myanmar. The task to promote policies that could bring better and healthier diets to all Myanmar people requires us to face the formidable challenge of moving us away from our own comfort zones, at least at 3 levels. We need to look at the entire system. We cannot any longer just focus on our usual target, theme, or constituency. We have to look beyond the farmer, the village, beyond the land, beyond the consumer, the worker, the food intermediaries, the researchers. A food system means that all these pieces are interconnected and require a multi-stakeholder approach. Second, we have to be challenging ourselves because we are aiming at being inclusive. We want inclusive food systems. So this means that we have to go and seek to bring back those who have been excluded or marginalized in the past from our own studies and work. And this might mean to face the politics of exclusion that explain why women or different ethnic groups have been excluded in the first place, and to find ways of disentangling the multiple political and social barriers they face to give them additional support so that these marginalized groups can be integrated into the food system. Finally, we have to face the challenge of sustainability because any food system would need to pay attention to biodiversity and climate change, but also to economic viability. In this respect, we can no longer just focus on the science of food production and adoption, but we need to pay attention to demand for food involving private consumers, intermediaries, and businesses. So at IDRC, we're thrilled to learn more from the cases that will be presented today, since they will all be providing lessons and perspectives on how Myanmar can overcome these challenges. Working together with IRR and CIAT, IDRC is planning to distill the findings from the last 3 webinars, as Iris just mentioned, and to produce a synthesis document that could help us to engage in further consultations with governments and with scholars and practitioners in Myanmar so that we can move forward on a Myanmar-focused agenda for action that will make healthy diets a reality for all the different peoples of Myanmar. Thank you for your attention. And now, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Irish to proceed with introductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgard, for the message and setting the tone for the conference. And thank you for emphasizing the need to widen our framework and to use more multi-stakeholder approach to make our work on food more effective. We are now ready to listen to our first speaker. The first one is Tuyen Huynh. She is the country coordinator of Agriculture for Nutrition and Health program in Vietnam and also a research associate under the Food, Environment, and Consumer Behavior lever of the Alliance of Bioversity International and CIAT, the Asia Hub. She currently leads activities of the Cross-Center A4NH program in its support of the national government and international agencies and movements in building sustainable food systems by ensuring production, delivery, and use of healthy food that ultimately provides economic, social, and nutritional benefits to all consumers while minimizing environmental footprints. Let us welcome our first speaker to talk about better decisions and actions during food systems transformation along rural-urban transect in Vietnam. Tuyen?
Thank you, Iris, for a very nice introduction. So, good morning, everybody. I'm here today to share with you our experiences our lesson and also our strategies that we have obtained during the process. We have built the food system profile for the policy engagement to support the food system transformation along the rural-urban transect in Vietnam. Next slide. Yeah, the food system in Vietnam has transformed rapidly under the economic development, the urbanization, and also the improved living standard. And this has major implications for not only nutrition and health outcome, but also the economic and environmental aspect. However, you can see here in Vietnam, the triple burden of malnutrition is still there, very high prevalence of stunting, together with the increasing prevalence of overweight obesity. And we still have the micronutrient deficiency. Next, please. You can see like the food system transformation lead into the increases in the food supply chains in Vietnam, especially on the food supply. However, it's also related to the increases in the greenhouse gas emission, considered as the negative environmental impact of the food supplies in Vietnam. So next, please. So our discussion with the remain challenges not only in the nutrition and health, but also in economic and environmental aspect. So we have decided to move on the food system approach. In this one, we use the participate approach together with to call for action from different actors for food systems for healthier diets. So why food system? Why food system for healthier diets in the food system transformation in Vietnam? I saw that 40% of the people say they are confident to talk about food system. I would like to touch the benefit of this webinar to share about food system and why the food system is very effective in our work in Vietnam. Please, can you click to show the video?
When we sit down to eat, we don't often think about how the food got in front of us. Where was the rice grown? How was the milk kept cold along the way? How were the vegetables kept fresh? Creating this meal involved a lot of people, steps, and activities. Multiply that across all the different foods being delivered to people all over the world, and a complex picture starts to form. We call this a food system. All the people, processes, and activities involved in getting food to people. Everyone on the planet is involved in the food system. We all eat, but some also grow food, some transport it, some process food or package it, some sell it, and some prepare it. Food systems are an enormous source of income and jobs globally. Food systems were fairly simple for a long time. Many people lived on farms and ate the food they grew or food that was grown close by. But things are changing and quickly. More people are living in cities, working in other types of jobs. They have less time for shopping and cooking. They buy their food from informal markets, supermarkets, and convenience stores. While consumers are demanding more diverse diets, they also want to know where their food comes from and how they can be sure it is safe. The results of people suddenly eating different foods in different ways are not always good. Sometimes the diversity means more sugar, salt, and fat, rather than vegetables, fruits, and other healthy foods. Rising rates of overweight, obesity, and micronutrient deficiencies could have disastrous health problems for many low and middle income countries. Changes in what people eat will also increase the pressure on our planet. Consumer demands shapes food systems, and we must find ways to adjust that demand toward healthier and more sustainable food choices. Through a healthy diet lens, researchers, policymakers, businesses, and others must work together to better understand the varied priorities between countries, better understand how parts of the system connect, and watch for unintended consequences. Together, we can ensure people have equitable access to a healthy, safe, and sustainable diet.
Thank you very much for showing the video. In that we explain why we come up with the food system approach for the food system transformation along the rural-urban transect in Vietnam. Next, please. So understanding that from the food system approach, we need to have to call for the collaboration among the actors along the food system elements from the food supply, food environment, and also the demand side from consumer. So we have come up with the first strategy that we need to include the activities to create a common understanding on food system among the stakeholders, and also identify the top food system issues in order to robust the action, the policy recommendation, and also intervention across rural urban areas. Next, please. So you can see that we have employed the conceptual framework from the food system in our work to build the profile. And the idea is that we build from the outcome of the food system in terms of the nutrition and health outcome, economic outcome, environmental outcome. Because each rural, peri-urban, and urban sites in Vietnam, they have the socio-economic development plan for each site, and they come up with the indicator in nutrition, economics, and environmental. Therefore, we would like to understand first the challenges remaining for the rural, peri-urban, and urban to be in line to contribute to the socio-economic development plan at the local area. And then based on the compendium of the food system indicator developed by the Agriculture for Nutrition and Health Program, we select the relevance and also the important indicators in the Vietnam context in terms of the nutrition and also economic and environment. And based on the remain challenges in terms of the outcome, we come up with remain challenges in terms of the intermediate outcome of food system in terms of the diet, about the quantity, quality, safety, and diversity. And we try back with the food supply chain, food environment, and consumer behavior, and the drivers of the food system to understand better, to create a common understanding about the current situation for the local policymakers and also for the actors, for example, like the international organization, the researcher, academy, etc. Yeah, next please. Due to the limited time, I only to show you some picture that can show what we have done during the process to build up the food system profile. And as you can see here, we start first with the food system outcome. You can see in the picture for the nutrition outcome, you can see that undernutrition remained the very big challenge in red color in the rural area. But in the peri-urban and urban, it's not really serious like the rural. So in the rural, we need to pay more attention on the double burden of malnutrition in terms of undernutrition. However, in the peri-urban and urban side, they have the burden in terms of the overweight and obesity. As you can see, we can highlight the differences in terms of the challenges of the peri-urban, urban, and rural areas. And then we also come up with the environmental and also economic outcome of the food system, that what remained to be shown in each side for each for the bottom-up approach. We need to listen, we need to do collaboration and create enabling environment to work with the local stakeholder. Next, please. And then we have to understand about how many different food groups the people consumed in the rural, peri-urban, and urban to see whether the vegetable and fruit consumption is different along the rural, urban transect in Vietnam. Next, please. And we need to understand about the behavior, about the consumption of the household level during a week. As you can see in the rural areas, they remain more with the carbohydrate consumption, and they also consume a lot of processing food because it's cheaper. So, but in urban side, they consume more with vegetable and also fruit. So now the very big question which implication that the people in the rural areas is the one who produce the diversity, but they are not the one who consume with diversity. So we need to understand from that and try back with the food supply chain, food environment to see what happened and how can we solve that from other elements of food system. Next, please. We can say that for the food supply chain, it includes not only production, but also the retail, the market network, and also the transportation network. And you can see here in the rural area, the production remains very important in the rural side. But come to urban area, the retail network is more important. So we need to understand the differences of food supply chains between and among the rural, peri-urban, and urban side to link with the challenge and also with the problem they have in the outcome. Next, please. For the food environment, we have collected the information and then we combine the information in terms of what food available in different types of the food retailers in rural, peri-urban, and urban. And we create a story map. You can see, can you click on the screen for the, you can see the story map we have created. I put here, and if you have time, you can spend more time to go with that. But we need to create some visualization product to make it more accessible to different target groups to create a common understanding on the food system and also food environment and demand side to set back the food supply chain. Next, please. And we go deeply to understand more about the individual demand in terms of what they think the food is helpful, healthy, and also safety. And we understand the perspective and also awareness of the consumer along the rural, peri-urban, and urban. Because the more we understand, the more we can make the food choice can be healthier. And we hope that the healthier food choice can set back the healthier food supply. Next, please. And at the end of the food system profile, we come up with the issues along the food supply chain, food environment, consumer behavior, and the driver of the food system. And based on the specific issues along the food supply chain, food environment, and consumer behavior of rural, peri-urban, and urban. And then we come up with the action that can be in high prioritized for the site. Next, please. And then we have the recommendation specific for each site, for rural, for peri-urban, and urban site. And then the next step we will need to do to sit together with the local actors along the food system for the policy engagement and also understanding from the bottom-up approach how the food system approach can create a common understanding from different actors in different elements of food system and how they can work together and how they support each other to contribute to the social economic development plan in the local areas. Next, please. So what we have learned from our process that the major obstacle that because the food system approach needs to have the multi-sectoral analysis and it also requires the diverse expertise from different organizations, especially if we go with the implementation level, we need to go with the local level and not all the data can be available. So what we have done to have the food system profile, we need to have the enabling environment to involve the participants of on the stakeholder at the beginning. So we need to have the events to introduce the concept of the food system and to highlight the importance of the different actors contributing to the food system approach for not only nutrition and health, but also economic and environmental outcome. And we need also to do the public-private partnership, even like research and also public relationship together to build up the product. And we need to have the capacity building to share the evidence base, to share the information. What we have obtained, what will be next step, we have to understand together the whole process we will do. So next step, we use the food system approach, and then we will be together with the stakeholder from different elements of food system. We sit together, we identify what's the most important for each side to go with action, to go with intervention, a policy recommendation to contribute to the social economic development plan. Yeah, nice. So that's on for the very short presentation, but we hope to share with you more information. You can click on the link, and you can also connect with the organizer. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tuyen, for sharing your work in 10 minutes. You have shared and discussed your work in characterizing local food systems, revealing the challenges and the outcomes, and hopefully it will guide policy and actions in Vietnam. Again, to our participants, I am inviting you to post your questions in the Q&A box so our speakers can respond to them directly. And some of the questions will be responded to during the Q&A session. So we're ready to listen to our next speaker. She will talk about nutrition-sensitive agriculture intervention for improving food security and nutrition in Philippine primary schools. Our next speaker is Emilita Monvilla Oro, the country director for IAR Philippines and currently the acting Asia Regional Director for IARR. She provides strategic direction to the country programs and oversee implementation of its flagship program, which is Food Security and Resilient Livelihood. She is also engaged in global networks such as promoting local innovation in ecologically oriented agriculture and NRM, or that's Prolinova, and also the Scaling Up Nutrition Movement, or SUN movement. For 30 years, she has worked in Asia, focusing on research and development, public health, community resilience building, community managed disaster risk reduction, monitoring, evaluation, capacity development, and documentation. She has masters in public health from BRAC University in Bangladesh. So let us welcome our second speaker, Emily.
Thank you, Irish. Good morning to everyone, and happy to be able to share with you about the work of IRRR here in the Philippines. In the last 10 years, IRRR has been strengthening the nutrition dimension of its development work via our food and nutrition security interventions. And today you will be hearing about our work on nutrition-sensitive agriculture interventions for improving food security and nutrition within the context of Philippine primary schools. Next slide. So I will be sharing with you about the ISNM, or the Integrated School Nutrition Model, and how this has been implemented in the Philippines. If you look at the context of the Philippines, though it's the fastest growing economy in Southeast Asia, it has not really translated into reduction in malnutrition. In fact, we still have stunting, these children who are really low for height given their age. We have child wasting, and we also have even child overweight. And if you look at this data, they are all very, very public or medium high significance. Next slide. Now, considering the context of the Philippines, using the food systems view, we ask ourselves, why do we have malnutrition in the Philippines? Yeah, click please. Here you will find that one of the underlying causes is really the inadequate intake of energy as well as micronutrients. If you look at the mean of one-day intake of fruit and vegetables in the Philippines, you have it as 169 grams, which is actually very low considering the recommended dietary recommended intake for a person per day. And if you look at fruits availability, they are really available. We are producing it locally as well as coming from other countries, yet we see household consumption and households not affording a nutritious diet. And definitely we see um, poverty as a very high factor affecting such, as well as all this climate change. In fact, you know, in the Philippines, we have a lot of typhoon that are really destroying our agricultural impacts. There are a lot of programs in the Philippines, but I will just be dwelling on the program of the Department of Education. They have institutionalized a program on the school-based feeding program as well as the gardening. Next slide. For the Department of Education, for years, we have been implementing the school-based feeding program, which are providing hot meals to our young children. Of course, this aims to address hunger and malnutrition so that they can improve attendance and academic performance. The school gardening, on the other hand, really looked at self-help food production, establishing school gardens so that they can be available as source of vegetables and learning laboratory. But when we were starting our program in 2012, we saw that there was a disconnect in the implementation of this program. And there are a lot of issues revolving around sustainability of the school gardens. Of course, we have the extreme weather as well as the limited access to planting materials. One issue that we also had is on sustaining the nutrition gains in school so that after their break or the school break, when they get back to school, they revert back to their malnutrition state. So these are some of the issues that we had when we were starting the project. So what IRRR did, next slide, in coordination with Food and Nutrition Research Institute, the Department of Education, is to develop and test what we call the integrated school nutrition model in a two-phase 5-year project funded by IDRC Canada. So this is anchored in the two national programs that I have mentioned, but we really looked at how it can be sustained via the nutrition education. What we did differently is to really strengthen the links of the three components as well as strengthen each of the components. For the school-based feeding program, what we did is to look at how of course, feeding can be enhanced using the iron fortified rice and the use of chemical-free vegetables that are coming from the school. And then we also had school serving as platform. Please click. School as serving as platform for the experiential nutrition education activities, both for parents as well as for the children. And definitely the school gardens were re-engineered to make it more sustainable using the agroecological approaches. More importantly, the capacity building program of teachers as well as the establishment of technical guides that has been very useful in the implementation and adoption of the model. Next slide. Yeah. Just a bit about the bio-intensive gardening. I think when you talk about food systems, source of food that is more accessible, sustainable, and affordable are very much warranted. And DIG really looks at crop diversification and sustainable intensification, promotion of local vegetables. We know they are very nutritious. They are climate hardy. You know, we have this root crops, all these leafy vegetables that you are seeing in your picture. So we should be able to promote them and utilize them. Yeah, can you click more? And we also have the adoption of agricultural practices as well as, you know, all these water conservation technologies. And, you know, summer, it's very, very challenging for gardening. So we have this technologies, techniques such as mulching, cover cropping with legumes that we found very important in sustaining the gardens. And of course, definitely, you also have the nutrient cycling that is very, very useful for carbon sequestration. Next slide. Now, this particular ISNM model had really generated positive nutritional outcomes. We have seen significant decrease in the proportion of undernourished children and also significant decrease in the anemia prevalence. And both for boys and girls, the mean increase in height, in weight, I mean, is very, very significant. And when we did our CAP survey, we saw an improvement in knowledge, attitude, and practices for both children and the parents. Next slide. Now, I'd like to share more with you also about the garden result. I think it's very important that because of this program, there has been an increase in the diversity of crops grown in school from a typical 3 to 5 to almost 60 types of crops in school on an annual basis. And because of this, they have ready access for vegetables, around 59% used for their feeding program, and the rest, of course, for their cafeteria. And also some of them were sold where they earn income. And such utilization of vegetables also provided some savings. And, you know, in the Philippines, when you have like 1.8 million undernourished children, this is already equivalent to $1.5 million in 1 year. So it's very useful for the program. Yeah, next slide. Definitely, we would want to bring this to more schools and to more kids. So we have had our scaling platform. We have the Lighthouse schools. You know, if you want to see what integrated school nutrition is, we bring them to our Lighthouse schools. They have their regular feeding program, a sustained gardens, as well as regular creative nutrition education. And they also are our research site. So we generate evidence from this Lighthouse school so we can have the promotion and adoption of the model. We also have Crop Museum, and this is very important because it really focusing on saving seeds, you know, especially those local crops that are very climate hardy and very nutritious. Next slide. So I'd like to share with you our multi-scalar approach for this model. So we really looked at how we will have the horizontal scaling where we partner with the Department of Education at the local level, as well as with other civil society organizations like Sun Civil Society Organization and the local government units via various learning exchanges and exposure visits. But more importantly is the institutionalization with the National Department of Education. And this is done via advocacy work, also influencing other agencies like the Department of Agriculture. So you can see when we started with one province with 27 model schools in the first phase of the project. And in the second phase, we had what we call the Lighthouse schools, 58, in order to reach 5 more provinces within one region. And we're happy to say that in 2018, the Department of Education central level had invested more than $360,000 to establish additional 215 schools. You know, this is still ongoing. We still have to do more because we would want to have one Lighthouse school per school district. And of course, this is really to influence and have direct benefits of our almost 1.2 million undernourished students. Next slide. So now I'd like to share with you some of the key lessons that we have learned. And hopefully this is important for Myanmar as well as in your other countries. I'd like to emphasize integration. You know, our approach, the blending of nutrition specific and nutrition sensitive interventions that of course will provide us better outcomes and more synergistic. I think we have seen this in the integrated school nutrition models. We have proven that schools are really effective platforms for integrating food and nutrition interventions. You know, you have your captured audience the students are there, the parents you can bring in anytime. And the capacity building, don't forget, is very important at all levels, in every stakeholders. We have trained the teachers, the principals, all the directors in the Department of Education, even at the undersecretary. These are very important because we capitalize on the strength of each organization and each stakeholder. Next slide. Here you have yeah, next slide. Here you have a picture when we went to Myanmar and visited the National Nutrition Center. And if you look at the other lesson, because enabling policy is very important. Some of these programs are really planned at the higher level. So we need to influence those who are making these policies, and we can only do that through evidence-based advocacy. So we have to document our work, making sure that the outcomes are readily available, shared to our policymakers, and have proof of concept sites. And in this one, we have the lighthouse schools to have a buy-in of the stakeholders. And finally, you know, we cannot do it alone. Stakeholders are important. Partnerships and relationships are built around one common goal. And all these are ingredients of scaling up. So hopefully you have learned from this experience work, and I'll be happy to respond to some of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily, for discussing how IRR in the Philippines utilize schools to co-create solutions and at the same time advance sustainable food system outcomes. And you've also emphasized the need to use multiple interventions. So let us now give our first two speakers an opportunity to either react to some of the comments or answer questions in the Q&A box. So let us start with Tuyen. There are a list of questions in the chat box. Would you like to expound on some of them that were directed to your presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Iris. And then I also like the idea they would like to understand more about the why the rural people and urban people, they have different food choice. And also I would like to share, I have said the answer in the chat box already, but I would like to share what we have learned because it's really important to be noted for the nutrition sensitive work in not only Vietnam, but maybe also other countries. Based on our talk and observe for the a whole week on the food consumption, the rural household mentioned that they consume a lot of vegetable, but only in terms of quantity, because for diversity, the variety of vegetables still less than in the consumption of the urban side, because the rural household, they only refer to consume the vegetable they wrote in their garden. So in the garden, it have limited varieties. And when they go to the market, they refer to buy meat and as other product, milk, but not vegetable. And then they mentioned that in their gardens, they can only wrote several varieties of vegetable. So it opened the door that in our intervention, we need to improve the awareness on understanding the nutrient value of vegetable, but also support for the garden in the home base. So the people can access to more kind of vegetable. So not only the quantity, but also need to pay attention to the diversity score. And then another thing that they consume the rural side, they tend to consume more processing food after the food system transformation. We, at the first step, we did not understand why, but after talking with them, because for example, in case of the rice soup in the label, in the front bucket label, they have very delicious picture of all there, the meat there, the vegetable there, the rice there, but in fact they only consume rice, only energy, no nutrient value. But the household, they did not understand, they cannot understand. So they only think well, it's very cheap, it has many things, it's delicious because it has salt inside and it's convenient. So when the children stay home, the grandparent can also cook the right soup for them. So they can understand why they need to go with the right soup. So if we continue like that for long term, we will have the micronutrient deficiency really serious in the rural area. Yeah, so I think the limited time, so I would like to share something like that in the chat box and also answer some questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Tuyen. You may continue to answer the questions in the Q&A box. Miss Emily, would you like to respond to some of the questions?
Yes, Irish, I have here from Queenie Rizaldo. She was asking about what are the role of parents of malnourished children in this school feeding program. Yeah, definitely parents really have a key role. And in the course of the implementation of the project, you know, the parents are the one cooking the food that will be given to their children, you know, the feeding program. And they really have they take turns in preparing. And in doing so, they also learn about the kind of food that can be prepared, more nutritious food, and they are able to bring that knowledge to their home. So we know that to be sustainable, we really have to make sure that whatever is done in school will also be done at home. So they really participated also in the nutrition education a lot and a part also of the planning. Irish, another question here by Ana Rita Ramirez on the lighthouse schools, whether they are sort of pilot schools. Actually, they are more than pilot schools. They are model schools and proof of concept sites. So they demonstrate what integrated school nutrition model is. They are also a platform for scaling because, you know, when we bring other schools in the lighthouse schools, they learn and they also copy what they have seen. And at the same time, they are the ones providing us all this data so we can really have some evidence that we can use for our own advocacy with the government, with the DepEd and other schools. Yeah, so I'll share other questions maybe later.
Okay, thank you, Tuyen and Emily, for responding to some of the questions. So I'm sure we are ready now to listen to the remaining two speakers. So to discuss value chain and food systems, the case of IARR Cambodia, our third speaker for this conference is Yim Soksofors. He is the program director for IARR in Cambodia. And Yim is responsible in coordinating and managing the activities of the Cambodia country program of IARR. He has worked for more than 18 years to promote family agriculture, food security and nutrition, community organizing, and other community development related work. So he also worked with FAO UN and SNV Netherlands Development Organization. He also worked with SEDAC, Cambodian Center for Study and Development in Agriculture, for more than a decade to improve the livelihood of smallholder farmers through the application of ecological agriculture, collective savings, farmer groups, and network. He holds a master in development management from Norton University. Yim?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Irish, for providing me opportunity to share what or Cambodia do relation to the value chain and food system. Yeah, next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, or in Cambodia, we work in 9 out of 24 provinces in Cambodia. Yeah. Next slide. Our main program focus on the improving food security and nutrition, enhancing household income. We'll build the capacity through training and coaching, and we promote climate smart agriculture, climate smart village. Next slide, please. Here are some of the donor and implementing partner that we work with, mostly from government, from training, research, yeah. And let me share with you some challenge relating to the agricultural production and market linkage in Cambodia. Yes, the first one, is the access to irrigation, because people rely on the raining water in the rainy season, but in the dry season they cannot continue doing the farming. And another thing is they have limited skill in climate smart agriculture, especially in the new context of climate change and variation. And another challenge they are facing is access to reliable capital for their investment. In Cambodia, we have many MFI or bank, but normally the interest is high, not suitable for small farmers. And farmers themselves normally sell their product individually, so they have less quantity of product, they have limited access to market information. This results in less negotiation power with the middleman or collector. And another challenge that difficult for them to supply their product to the market. Normally the buyer, they want regular quantity, they want regular supply, but as the individual farmer, they are difficult to provide the regular supply to buyers. Another challenge is competition with the imported product. Normally imported product is sold in a cheaper price, which is difficult for local farmer to compete. And local farmers normally rely on buyers who come from outside their community to buy their product. So they lack of transport, they lack of communication with the buyer. Next slide, please. So IIR Cambodia, we promote the agricultural production, and also we try to facilitate the market linkage between smallholder farmer to market. Next slide. So for the production side, we focus on the climate resilient agriculture. So we train farmer different technique that is enable them to use existing resource to cope with the climate change and variation. So we encourage farmer to use the existing input rather than buying external input from the market. At the same time, reduce the production cost and increase the profitability. The last point, we focus on the food safety and nutrition because in Cambodia, many vegetable, I can say 60 to 70% imported from other country, and mostly people think that they are not really safe for their health. So the food safety is the core of our agricultural extension program. We promote the minimum farm package, which means we encourage small farmer, at least they plant 3 types of vegetable, 3 types of fruit tree, and integrate it with livestock and make it all year round. As I mentioned earlier, farmer can access to water only 6 months in the year because the dry season they don't have. So they need to try to improve. They need to increase the investment in order to have water for farming all year round. And for the market linkage, we work with small holder farmer. So as the small holder farmer, they are difficult to link their product to the market. Because buyer want more quantity, want regular of supply, want market requirement, something like this. But with the group approach, it means farmer are formed into group. They have capacity to comply with the requirement of the buyer. Next slide, please. So let me brief you our market linkage process. Normally, several years ago, I mean, people just start with the production. They just plant and then try to find market after harvesting. But now, before planting, we need to do a market assessment. It means we need to think about market-driven approach. What market need, what product, what are the products that have highest value at the market. So after we get the result from the market assessment, we can identify what type of crop that we should be promoted, we should be selected for planting. And then we form like a farmer producer group based on the interested farmer. The number of farmer producer group can be 5, 7, 10, or or 20, depending on the number of interested farmer in the village. After that, IRR trainer continue providing the capacity building to farmer group. We focus on the leadership and management, especially for the management committee or the group. Normally, there are 5 management committee member per group. And we also train the group member to understand about the nature of the group. And we help in helping in developing the production plan or business plan, marketing strategies. And next we do the facilitate the market linkage. We organize the stakeholder workshop. We call like this stakeholder workshop, where producer and buyer and the other actor in the value chain participated. And at that time, farmer producer, they has opportunity to share what they can supply, what is the quality of their product that they can supply to market, and the buyer, they also can share what they need, the market requirement, and they find opportunity for connection between producer and buyer. And after that, there is possibility for contract between producer and farmer. Yeah, and our farmer group, I mean, we try to provide ongoing support to the farmer producer group, make sure they can implement the business plan successfully. I would like to add that actually the farmer producer group, they not really, I mean, not only produce the agricultural product to the market, but also they do the collective saving. So the collective saving enable them to access to capital for investment in agriculture and also to expand their business activity. Next slide, please. This is one example that the representative from our group, he signed the contract with the food processing company in front of the Minister of Agriculture. So I mean, the producer group making good progress, make a better connection with buyer, even they have contract farming with the buyer. So the management committee play a role to coordinate with the buyer, but at the same time, at the village level, they have to prepare production plan with the group member, make sure they have agricultural product to supply the buyer regularly and with the quantity and quality needed by the buyer. Yeah. Next slide. Taking this opportunity, I just would like to highlight some impact of COVID-19 to the smallholder farmer in Cambodia. I mean, especially for the producer group that IRO Cambodia work with. Now in Cambodia, there are more than 200 cases of COVID-19. So when it happened, it actually impact to the livelihood activity of the small farmers. Farmers feel that they are difficult to cover their daily expense on food, on health, children education. This is because their income has reduced. The capacity to supply agricultural product to market have reduced, meaning that they lost their income as well. Yes, next slide, please. At the moment, I just mentioned the agricultural product supply to the market is reduced because some restaurant, hotel, yes, they was closed. They was closed. So the demand of the agricultural product is less than before. That is why it impact to the sales of the agricultural product. And another thing is that I mean, when the COVID-19 just happened, the government do not allow to export the virus to international market. In Cambodia, in general, we can say 70% of farmers, they cultivate normal white rice. Only 30% they cultivate fragrant rice. So when the export is closed, the price of normal white rice decrease. So it also affect to the income, to the profit of the normal of the small farmer as well. Yeah. Next, please. Another thing is, especially for the casual labels, they rely on income from garment factory and construction, working as a construction laborers. So when COVID-19 happened, then some garment factory, they are closed, and also the construction stopped. So they lost their income, which is difficult for them to afford for food like they did before the COVID-19. Yeah. Next slide, please. And let me say, but in our target area, 60% of the total family per village, they are indebted. They borrow money from MFI and bank. So it is also hard for them to find the money to pay for loan, for loan or interest like before. And especially it is the burden for women, because women normally take care of the daily expense, and this put more difficulty for them. Next slide. So based on our experience, uh, what we do is contributing to build the resilient market, because we study the market need first before starting the production. So it means that before planting, we know our market already. And our group approach, I mean, it is good, because as individual farmer, it is difficult for them to supply the agricultural product to the market. And as a group, they do the agricultural production, they do saving, and even 7 to 80% of the earning from saving is allocated for the environmental conservation. Our target farmer, they live in the community protected area, community forestry. So the earning 7 to 8% from saving allocated for patrolling or tree replanting in the community protected area. And when we have saving group, we have management committee member, and the management committee member, they play a role to closely communicate, to closely connect with the buyer. So we know in advance what product, what quantity, what quality of product that buyer need. This also reduce the risk. Even COVID-19 happen, our farmer producer group still can supply their agricultural product to the market as well. And the last point, we focus on the food safety. We follow the GAP, good agricultural practice. In ASEAN, we have GAP standard. In Cambodia, we also have Cambodia GAP. So we produce the agricultural product that meet the food safety, which is now becoming high demand for the consumer, especially consumer in the town, in the provincial town, in Phnom Penh city, for example. Yeah. So next slide, please. Yes, thank you very much for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you, Yim, for that very interesting sharing of the work that you are doing in Cambodia, and for highlighting the critical role of group-based approaches to make GAP or low external input agriculture sustainable, as well as to effectively link farmers to the market and in turn influence the availability of safe food to us, to the consumers. So to our previous two speakers, please continue answering the questions in the Q&A box. And for questions to Yim, feel free to post them on the Q&A box, and we will get back to them in a while. So I'm sure we're ready to hear from our next speaker. The next topic is on transforming the food business enterprise through better workers and workplaces. Today we have with us Dindo Campilan. He is the Manager, Chief Technical Advisor for Entrepreneurship and SME Support of UNILO in Yangon. He currently leads the SME support to the agri-food, manufacturing, and tourism sectors in Myanmar. And he also manages the flagship project for enhancing business development services, or BDS, to improve SME productivity and working condition. He previously worked with CIAT, International Center for Tropical Agriculture, as the Director for Asia while based in Vietnam. He also served as CIAT's Asia's senior expert for climate smart agriculture, nutrition sensitive value chain, and outcome monitoring and evaluation. He also held posts at the International Potato Center, or CIPT, and he held various science leadership and program management roles while based in the Philippines, India, and China. He has a PhD in agricultural and environmental science. Let us welcome our fourth speaker, Dindo.
Thank you, Iris. I hope you can hear me clearly. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to see familiar names in the list of participants, especially those I had the chance to work with in my previous life with the CJAR and particularly with CIAT on climate resilience, inclusive business, and nutrition sensitive value chains. But today I'm wearing the hat of the UN ILO, and I think I need to start by explaining why I'm here, besides my long association with the IAR and CIAT, of course. So ILO's mandate is setting global standards for labor practices, protection of workers' rights, and promoting workplace productivity and safety. But within this overall agenda, we also work to support small and medium enterprises as a strategic platform for job creation, socioeconomic inclusion, and private sector engagement. And that's the reason that I'm part of this e-conference, as I talk in particular about food business enterprises and how we're working to help promote better workers and workplaces. Now, over the course of the three e-conferences that have been held, we've been talking about food systems and how they exist for a purpose, which is primarily for securing food. Now, we ask so many questions in transforming food systems for enhancing availability, access, utilization, and stability, and resilience. Next, please. Yes. Now, one dimension of food security, as we know, is how do we make food accessible? And there are usually three ways in which we access food. Most of us are going to go to lunch after now. Think about the food you're going to take for lunch. Where did you access it from? Is it something that you produce and you grow from? Something that was shared to you with your family members or your office mates? Something that you purchase or you buy? So over time, as individuals, families, and communities, we have a combination and a mix of different ways of accessing food. And there are certain events and situations where the balance and the combination of these ways of food access change over time. When you talk about food purchase, which is of course the buying and selling of food, this is where lies the important role of food business enterprises. And so I'm going to talk about business enterprises supporting food in relation to the overall goal and framework for food security. Next. So when you talk about transforming food systems, which is the overarching theme of this conference, we also need to look at specifically at transforming the food business enterprise. Now, the word transforming, transformative, transformation, these are very powerful and purpose-driven words in the sense that we're not talking about changes in individual practices or components. We are talking about systems level rethinking and redesign. And this relates to structures, processes, and external drivers. Next. Looking, for example, at the many different types of food business enterprises that we have. Different enterprises are doing different things within the food business sector. There are those doing procurement, storage, wholesaling, all down to retailing, point of consumption, servicing. But I think if we think of a good and timely example of transformation, let's look at the COVID-19 impact on business enterprises. You see how in the face of food supply disruptions, we see novel ways in which we procure food supply. We look at how food products are being transported. In the realities of quarantine procedures and roadblocks, we are seeing many different ways of moving these food products, even understanding regulations along the way. On the other side, on the consumption aid, and look at how in many urban settings, food delivery services are becoming a boom sector as we hesitate to go out of our houses. So instead, we see the food products coming to us. You look at food of consumption servicing, how many of you have been to restaurants outside your homes in the last month? And if you go, you see the differences in how restaurants are rearranging tables, maintaining social distancing. Some are putting even shields, and all you have all of those hand washing and sanitizing. So these are examples of transformation, and this is just about COVID-19. We have a long history of many different trends and cycles of how food business enterprises have been transformed. And in the next slide, please. And in addition to that, for example, you see other external drivers. We talk about climate change, how the business sector is more conscious about carbon footprints. At ILO, we focus on the issue of labor migration dynamics. And a particular challenge right now is how we're dealing with the COVID-displaced migrant workers returning from the Middle East or from other countries in Southeast Asia, and how we retool them as they reestablish livelihoods when they go back to the rural or farming communities. You see technological change. We talk about e-money. We talk about all this digital entrepreneurship initiatives and online platforms. All of this refer to the transformation of food business enterprises, which in turn contribute to the transformation of food systems that we talk about in general. Next slide. So at ILO, we focus on two intervention entry points for food business enterprises. Better workers, looking at the human and the organizational, and better workplaces, looking at the physical and operational resources. Now, we're aware that there are hundreds and maybe thousands of entrepreneurship, value chain, agribusiness programs and organization. So what distinguishes our approach and focus as ILO? Next slide. So let me give two examples of this. One is called SIYB, Start and Improve Your Business. So it's a system of interrelated training packages and materials supporting small-scale entrepreneurs. What makes it different is it's not a one-size-fits-all entrepreneurship development program. You can actually have different entry points depending on where you are. Are you still thinking of a business? You don't even have a business right now? Or are you somebody who's already doing one and wants to grow it further? That's why you can see there, it is generating your business idea all the way down to expanding your business. Now, this is available in over 100 countries already, SIYB. In Myanmar, for example, we also have 450 certified trainers as part of the quality assurance, because you don't just have anybody doing SIYB training. You have an entity which is called SIYB Myanmar, which is really the business development service arm that's coordinating provision and delivery of SIYB. And we're proud that in the Myanmar example, this is totally private sector led. And so anybody who joins the training or receives coaching pay for the services provided. Now, in addition to the main package for SIYB, it has been adapted to different sectors. So as you're aware, we work multi-sectorally. So besides the agri-food sector, we've been adapting this for tourism. We're also working on food retail. We have add-on products for startups, business eye openers, and currently we are about to launch the e-learning version to SIYB training. Next slide. A second example is what we call SCORE, Sustaining Competitive and Responsible Enterprises. Compared to SIYB, this focuses on the workplace, particularly in factories and SME settings. And as you can see, it focuses in issues or challenges faced by factories and SMEs in relation to HR, talent management, to workplace safety and health, cleaner production, overall continuous improvement. Now, this has been introduced originally for the food enterprise sector in general, but we have also adapted this, and we are currently doing another cycle focusing on the hospitality industry, particularly hotels and restaurants. We are also developing and about to launch add-on products on COVID-19 safety guidelines, as we are requested by the Myanmar government on what should be the criteria and the guidelines for reopening hospitality service institutions, and also for factories in general. Next slide. So as ILO, we're not just interested with how many businesses and how many enterprises you've created, but the broader question, the long-term question of how does this all lead to job creation, which is what is our mandate in general, and how does this contribute to social welfare, economic justice, and social development goals. But coming back, next slide, coming back to the issue of food business enterprise, what is interesting for us as we review our data is that in the case of SIYB and SCORE, it's actually the food business sector which has been our major client and what we might call beneficiary in terms of ILO's training products. It's just an indication of the relevance of SIYB and SCORE to food business enterprises. Let's look at SIYB. As you can see, we have trained since 2014 over 40,000 individuals. We have 450 certified trainers, over 10,000 enterprises established. Out of this, 2/3, 68%, are in the food sector. They're either farm business enterprises, they are food retailing services, or other types of food services like canteens and restaurants and food deliveries. So 2/3 of the enterprises and the entrepreneurs joining SIYB come from the food business sector. The same for SCORE. So again, this is recently introduced. In the last 2 years, we've supported over 100 factories and enterprises. 72% come from the food processing and restaurant sectors. So overall, this reaffirms that for us and for our support to Myanmar and the other countries, the food business sector and food business enterprises will be an important sector that we need to work hand in hand with. Next slide. So my last point is about the key challenges. As a UN agency, we're here to support governments and policies. And I share this an example of Myanmar, where about 2 weeks ago, we had the global summit on COVID-19 and the world of work. And the State Councilor of Myanmar outlined the 4 important pillars of what the government of Myanmar is doing in relation to COVID-19. And based on this policy agenda, we as an organization look at how we can help various stakeholders in the country operationalize and realize these priorities set by the government. Number one is talking about the economic relief plan. It's not only Myanmar, all of you, and you're in different countries. I'm sure your countries have your respective national economic relief plans. We look at how we as ILO and using our tools can help in advising interventions, whether it's in the case of credit, it's in the case of social safety nets in support of relief plans. What's interesting in number 2 is how the Myanmar government has prioritized 3 sectors which it considers to be the most vulnerable and most affected for COVID-19. Garment industries, which is not a surprise considering how much of the world's garment industry is based on a lot of factories, especially women workers, countries like Myanmar or Bangladesh. Hotels and tourism, and MSMEs, the micro within along with the small and medium enterprises. The third one is, in fact, a very urgent request and action that we're making now. Every country, including Myanmar, is asking, when do we allow factories to open? And how do we ensure that there's no second or third wave for COVID? So based on our work on occupational and health safety, we are helping design and formulate COVID-19 preventive measures, not only to regulate the opening, but also to advise and guide behavior of workers in these workplaces. The last one is about tripartite social dialogue, and particularly in Myanmar, a major focus of the government right now is what to do with all these returning migrant workers. It's not only Myanmar, I mean the Philippines and Vietnam. We are seeing thousands of these migrant workers from the Middle East. In the case of Myanmar, what's interesting is many of them, for example, are construction workers in countries like Thailand, and they have actually premium pay because they're considered high-skilled workers. Now they're returning to Myanmar. Should they be working for construction projects in Yangon, or should they be going back to their states and reestablish livelihoods in agriculture and rural farming? And this is where the question again of, as in terms of small and medium enterprise development and entrepreneurship, what can we do for COVID impact on returning migrant workers? Okay, last. Okay, so by way of 4 priorities, going back to the theme, we believe that there are strategic directions for the food business enterprise sector, which includes targeting the micro. Sometimes we forget that SME, there's also the M, which is the micro, which are usually rural, they're women-led, and they're home-based. Second is about the issue of sustaining business development services beyond project mode. How do we release the services from subsidies and grants and they operate on viable business models? This is in fact one of the primary roles I'm doing right now, helping entities within Myanmar and in other countries establish sustainable institutional models for offering business development services beyond reliance on project funding. Digital entrepreneurship and e-commerce, that's the reality we're facing in the 4th industrial revolution. Myanmar has one of the highest penetration rates for digital communications. I mean, look at everyone with mobile phones. What can we do to harness the potential of the digital revolution to support SMEs? And of course, promoting green jobs and climate smart value chains, it's not only about making businesses environmentally responsible, but also developing new strategies to target enterprises in emergencies. And we refer to targeting enterprises in emergencies, we talk about climate emergencies, or even enterprises in conflict zones and in conflict areas. Last slide. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you following this e-conference. Good day.
Thank you, Dindo, for that presentation. It has enlightened us on what comprises the food enterprise business or food business enterprise, and also you presented well the need to transform the existing structures and processes, as well as its link to the food systems outcome. Now I would like to call or invite our 3rd and 4th speaker to respond to any of the questions posed in the Q&A box, or you may react to some of the statements in the chat box as well. Let me first call on Yim.
Yes, thank you, Iris. There are many questions, but let me pick up some questions to answer. The first one from Nyok Farms. The question is, would you plan to use an app and social media for promoting, for marketing? Yes, of course, currently farmer producer group, they are using the social media, especially Facebook, which is a popular social media channel in Cambodia, to promote their product. For the app, now not yet with IIO, but we can work with the other development partner. We have different apps like Chamka, Cam Agri Market, something like this. And recently, a new project funded by IFAT called Sambat, they are going to develop an app that covers the whole value chain. It means from input, producer, collector, up to the end user. It means that if I am the producer, I can find transporter, I can find input supplier, I can find buyer using the app. And consumer also do the same, can find the producer. So within one app, it means they can connect with each other in the whole agricultural value chain. Yeah. And another question from Dr. Marco Rondon asking about the type of product reaching to the market and the change in consumption pattern. The answer for the type of the product reaching to the market, not much change, because our farmer, they plant the local product and mostly they rely on the rainwater for planting. It means that they still have a limited access to irrigation. But for for the consumption pattern, we see there are different, especially among the consumer in the provincial town, in the Phnom Penh city. They try to identify what product from local product, what product from what product are imported product. So they try to support the local product as well. Yeah, and yes, the more question, but only 2 questions allowed to answer. So I may try to answer the other question in the Q&A box. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, yes, please do. Thank you, Yim. Dindo, would you like to?
Yes, I see 2 questions starting from the bottom from Marco on question about finance. Yes, being new to ILO, I've seen that our intervention is focused primarily on training and capacity building, but we know that it's just one ingredient in the overall approach to enterprise development. And that's why it's very important to bring together different actors in the platform, those who provide capacity building and finance, even access to services, say legal registration, and market promotion. I was in another seminar last week, also in Myanmar, where because of the default in repayment of loans, especially among many farmers, there was a lot of suggestion to offer new loans and credit support. But another group within the conference said, what's the point of providing credit right now if there is no market, if there are bottlenecks in the chain? So yes, I think finance along with other interventions are very important, not only for COVID-19, but in general. I don't have example for ILO Myanmar, but in a previous job, for example, back in the Philippines, where CIAT worked with the National Agricultural Credit Council, they were offering credit and insurance for farmers affected by climate risk. What we have done is to help them in a climate risk vulnerability targeting, so that these are included in investment planning, but also even in the review of loan applications by degree of climate risk vulnerability. And that helps in targeting funds from the government intended for climate resilience, particularly for those who are most at risk for climate change. There's a second question before that, which is on mining in Myanmar. Well, as you're aware, a few weeks ago, there was an incident on the mining situation up in the north. There was an accident. And within ILO, we have different sections working on different things. So I have colleagues working on occupational health and safety. In fact, our colleague was just in Yapita recently working with the government on how to prevent further occurrences of these accidents. In the case of SIYB, we don't have yet a product focusing on mining, occupational health and safety, because at the moment, the urgent demand is for us to respond to COVID. But I think it's a matter of adaptation of these training products, but mining would be, I think, unique and particularly challenging, given it's a very different workplace. It's not a factory. It's out there. It's not also a farm. But we'd love to work with different groups and learning how to do this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your questions, and also to our speakers for responding to them. So just to let you know, recording of this conference and of previous conferences will be made available through the IARR YouTube account. We will be sharing the link with you next week via email, along with the highlights or key messages of the 3 conferences. I would like to thank, on behalf of IARR, I would like to thank our speakers in all 3 of the series, the reactors who made their time to lead the discussion to understand the food systems framework approach and the sample intervention to improve food security, health, and nutrition. We thank our partners, IDRC, the Alliance of Bioversity International, and CIAT for co-organizing these events with IARR. Thank you all and have a good morning.